your reaction to the latest iteration of NR200 might be the same as mine. Like, who is this for? I just want a refreshed OG, and yeah, I'm going to talk about that today. Welcome to Machines and More. 5 years ago, I reviewed the OG NR200. It was one of the first cases that I had reviewed, and it's both funny and embarrassing to look back on that review, but it's also encouraging to see where I've improved as a reviewer. And a big thanks to you for sticking with me. I know a lot of you have been subbed to the channel since those days, and here is a huge shout out to you. And if you love the NR200, go ahead and give this video a like down below, okay? So like many of you, I'm a big proponent of the NR200. It is a very popular case. It has been 5 years since the OG released, and since then we have had, the first update was a few limited color editions. We had the NR200P Max, which was a bundle-only product with a mandatory power supply and a 280 AIO. After that, we got the NR200P V2, which was basically the case from that Max as a standalone product. And as you might have seen from CES earlier this year, the NR200P V3 is this, shall we say, GPU-focused design that looks kind of funny with this big cutout. And of course, I don't fault them at all for offering this, because it is just one of many flavors of this case that they offer concurrently. But throughout all this, even though Cooler Master has maintained the OG NR200 in their lineup, you might recall when V2 launched, at one point the OG was reportedly end of life, right? Then they changed course and brought it back. But anyway, through this, there has been no update to the case whatsoever. And as much of a game-changing ITX case that this was, that's not great. It's been 5 years, and I wanted to share my thoughts and bring up just 5 ways that Cooler Master can continue the legacy of this case towards a true NR200 Mark II. So number one, it's pretty simple, the front panel I/O. So 5 years ago, motherboard manufacturers started to add in USB-C internal headers. And at the time in mini-itx and mini-itx space, there were just a few boards. You could count them on just a few fingers. So you could make the argument that at that point it wasn't imperative, but USB-C headers nowadays, they're almost always present. So one thing that the NR200P V2 got right was a Type-C port, in addition to the 2 Type-A ports. This is an easy update that could be much appreciated by NR200 fans and would bring this case in line with competing products as well. Now, this might be considered too user-focused at the expense of profit, so I don't know if any money-loving corporation would even ever allow this to happen. But a very sensible update could be to sell an updated insert that users could order. And none of this would have to change, just a rectangular block to fill in the Type-A space with a Type-C port in the middle. I think that might be enough for many of you, and then you wouldn't have to buy a whole new case when you already have a perfectly good build. Just switch out the I/O part, right? Number 2, the dimensions of the case could benefit from a little tweak, particularly the width. The beauty of the NR200 is its versatility, so it can go between moderately tall tower coolers, side-mounted AIOs. We've done plenty of crazy builds, and of course you can still go with a vertical GPU if so desired, right? There's just so much that you can do with this case. NR200P V2 and V3 has in essence branched off into one direction. It's a liquid cooling focus, and it pigeonholes users into using a vertical GPU with a top radiator setup. It's not very flexible. It's just, all the builds sort of end up one way. It's not bad, but it misses the mark on what made this case great. So on that development, I think it would be beneficial to give the NR200 a slight push towards the air cooling direction. That kind of branches off the other way. The OG supported 155 millimeters of air cooler, and there are lots of great coolers that officially and unofficially fit, like the Thermalright PA120, PA140, Noctua U12A, to name a few, right? But plenty of cases like the Ghost R1, which is coming soon, NKSM3, and even the Slinger S620, which actually came out just slightly after the OG NR200. These cases support big air coolers, and by crossing over into that 165-ish millimeter arena, you truly open up the possibilities for big air cooling. And at a very minimum, it reduces the, will it fit kind of agony that comes along with planning a build like this. And it also makes using the side panel for case fans possible with coolers on the larger side. Now, unlike the V2 and V3, though, this change wouldn't negatively affect the versatility of the case. you would still get the liquid cooling ability, right? And I think this develops the case in a way that would satisfy the desires of those that lean towards air cooling the case, but you still have the option to liquid cool. Now, all things being equal, with that change to a roughly 195mm wide dimension, the case would grow about a liter to that 19-liter space. Will it bother some? Maybe. So that brings us to number 3, because I think the front panel could use a little update. Now, one of the reasons you have this cavity in the front panel is because the case is useful for 2.5-inch drives that attach to the inside part of the chassis. That's not a bad feature, but if we had to shrink down one dimension, I think this would be the good one. I think it would be a good idea to ditch this thicker front panel and just open up the front panel. We see this concept with cases like the N case's greater front panel or the Deepcool CH160, and some of you might remember this sort of knockoff case that I reviewed and that surprisingly did one thing well, and that was support this front ventilation design. So it's very helpful for optimal airflow with tower coolers. Plenty of mid-towers work this way, so why not here, right? So for those of you that would lament that SSD space being lost, I think the panel can still be redesigned such that the drives could be mounted on the inside of the front panel, and those drives are a little bit less ubiquitous these days, so I think for many this could be an acceptable compromise. You still have the mounting spot on top the PSU cage, right? Benefit there, additional fan compatibility, and that would open up space for front fans. You got two 120mm mounts at the front. That would be great. The aforementioned Andes case allowed for that. The Slager S620 or CH160 support a fan at the front. And then an additional benefit of the extended width is allowing for a back 120mm when only a 92mm fits there. Okay, number 4, power supply flexibility. So the NR200 can already support an appropriately long ATX power supply. Cooler Master does offer an optional ATX bracket for the case. I'm not sure you can still purchase it today, but they do still offer the 3D print file that you can do it yourself. But why not make this an included accessory that comes with the case to give users the flexibility? With an included metal bracket for the front, with the open ventilated front, the PSU could orient either direction based on the user's preference, and that will, of course, usually come at a compromise for GPU length, but that expands on the flexibility for the user. So lots of NR200 adoptees were those that downsized from bigger builds, and allowing them to keep their existing power supply is a great incentive. As a plus, that bracket could also allow for another SFX or SFXL power supply position at the front, so win-win. Okay, last point that I wanted to talk about. Number 5. This is perhaps not as important, but I think keeps the case even more competitive, and again, flexibility talking points, right? So mATX boards. So some tend to be more on the budget side. Some are, downright gorgeous like this one. Either way, there will be users that gravitate towards the medium board size as an additional option over the more limited mini-itx lineups. We see cases like the N-Case M1 Evo, and then the M3 will do this. Of course, you can get a Lee & Dan A3, but that's a much bigger case, and this is all about giving the flexibility while still maintaining NR200-like footprint. So how do you do it? Well, a typical 4-slot mATX board is 244 by 244 millimeters. And while the odd 3-slot mATX dimension boards do exist and they do physically fit the OG, going for full 4-slot support will make this next iteration the real deal. The thing is, there is already enough internal space for an mATX board like that. That just requires moving the power plug position and adding an additional standoff position in addition to where ITX now, but it can be done. So if they don't want to do that, they want to keep the layout how it is, that might require increasing the height of the case approximately 10 millimeters. So that has the impact of giving some additional GPU thickness clearance for mini-itx mode. But depending on the board, you might actually go a slot lower, right? So the mATX GPU thickness allowance may be slightly less than the current case is. But either way, this would be an option within this case that builders can prioritize the things that they want and build how they like. So now you might have noticed that none of my talking points involved expanding GPU dimensions, because in my opinion, the OG's GPU compatibility is already very good. And even though there have been some truly larger GPUs that have come along in recent years, that doesn't mean SFF builders at large are concerned about them. And by extension, SFF case makers shouldn't completely redesign a case just because they want to make GPU compatibility more than it really needs to be for that odd user. And I know that was in consideration for the vertical GPU focused designs for the NR200 V2 and V3. My opinion here is that users should always choose the right components for the case they're building it, and for all the GPUs on the market now, there are plenty of even bigger partner cards that will fit the existing OG NR200 dimensions. If the front panel can be reduced enough, if you go mini-itx without increasing the height, I think the case can practically stay the same volume by my calculation. If the height increases slightly, the case maybe grows slightly to somewhere in the high 18s, which still isn't too bad if you get all that extra functionality. So yeah, those are just some thoughts. Happy birthday, OG NR200. I'm sure many of you still love this case. I still do. And I don't know if Cooler Master is actually planning on updating it. I certainly hope they do. And if they don't, someone else is going to eat their lunch. So curious what you think. My impression here is that they are in fact receptive to your feedback. So let them know in the comments down below. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And hey, let's send the NR200 into legit Mark II status. All right. Thanks for watching.